Welcome to the Start Something Show. Join world-renowned experts, change agents, and everyday folks who have done the amazing. All here to help you start something incredible. Now it's time to step out, live your perfect day, and create a legacy with your host, Tina Dietz.
You know, the way of podcasting, things don't always go as you planned. And when I was interviewing Dr. John Demartini, who's one of the world's leading experts on personal development, I got so mesmerized inside of the conversation we were having that I recorded an entire hour with him without taking any break to pause. So in the interview today, where you're going to pick up the conversation, is about halfway through that hour. When Dr. Demartini was first on the show in season 1, we featured kind of his background and his incredible story that he'll touch on a little bit in this episode as well, about how he really went from homeless, being a homeless person, to, again, being this incredible human being traveling the world 350 days out of the year on his yacht, teaching people how to have better lives and become better human beings. It's quite a conversation. It's pretty in-depth, and I really hope that you'll enjoy it. I'd love to hear your feedback if you want to leave comments on the episode or through the contact page at thestartsomethingshow.com. Now, this episode also focuses on how to find a mentor, which is a really big issue for a lot of us. I don't know about you, but there are times in my life where I really wish that I had had some excellent mentoring early on, and wonder if I would have made different decisions as a result. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. I love my life now. And at the same time, there's always this thought of, if I had to do it over again, how would I do it better? I can't change that for myself, but I can pay that forward with my clients and with my kids as well. So absolutely soak this in. This is an episode that definitely you're going to want to possibly listen to more than once. It's full of gems. It's full of a lot of information on improving yourself, improving your life, really leading a values-driven life. And I know you'll get a lot out of it. So we're going to get right over to Dr. Demartini. We're going to pick right up in the middle of that conversation. We're going to get to that right after one quick note of appreciation for the folks making it possible for us to bring the show to you today. Ah, yes, the 1980s. My childhood. Did you ever see those commercials back in the 80s for the hair club for men, where the spokesperson said, "I was a customer and had such great results, I bought the company"? Well, that's not so different from the story I have about how I started producing and publishing podcasts. When I wanted to launch my show, I knew that if I tried to figure out all the moving parts on my own, it would never get done. So, on the recommendation of John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire, I hired Cashflow Podcasting, and it was one of the best decisions I have ever made. I had such a fabulous experience having Ben Kruger and his team at Cashflow Podcasting launch my podcast that we ended up working together. Launching podcasts is a blast, and if you want to have your own podcast and do it right, you can go to cashflowpodcasting.com/Tina and get the wonderful Cashflow Podcasting 21-step podcast launch checklist. That's what I did to get my show started. If you've been dreaming about your own podcast to build your empire, now is that time. Go to cashflowpodcasting.com/Tina and get started. What then, looking back on your history, would you consider a pivotal moment, a moment of brilliance after that initial moment of clarity you had in Hawaii in your history that made a huge difference in the growth of your reach and your business?
Well, there's a number of pivotal moments in my life. Probably, I'll go all the way back to the beginning there. I had to wear braces as a child on my leg and arm because I had deformities. And the day I got out of that was a pivotal moment because all I do is want to run. I've been on the run ever since, I guess. And then when my teacher in first grade told me I would never read, write, or communicate, never amount to anything, never go very far in life, I believed her for 10 years until I met that guy at 17 that believed in me more than I believed in others. So I learned that day when I met him how important it is to not let other people's opinion dictate your destiny. And when I was 14, I had the opportunity. I was hitchhiking from Houston, Texas to Los Angeles, and I just had this serendipitous opportunity to meet Howard Hughes. And he took me to a library and told me to learn how to read, because he said there's only two things they can never take away from you, and that is your love and wisdom. So, gain love and wisdom, learn how to read. And that was a pivotal, because I read every day. I mean, I've read 30,000 books now. Then I met a mystic when I was 23 who had 6 PhDs. He was 35 years old. He was extremely brilliant. And I mentored under him and learned philosophy and you might say a mystical aspect of philosophy, which expanded my thinking process vastly. And that allowed me to study Eastern and Western philosophical constructs to play a bigger game in my mind. So I could see the earth as a little play toy. Instead of this big thing, it was a little play toy. Then I was blessed to meet a guy named Jim Parker. And Jim Parker is the one that talked about service. And I really got the message of how important it is to not project assumptions onto people, but find out what real needs are and be of service to people. And little by little, I met a gentleman who helped me in finance, who mentored under me. And I kind of wrote my PhD on finance, even though I didn't get my PhD. I just did it for myself with his help. And he created a big national organization on financial planning. And I met many other minds. I met Freeman Dyson from the Institute of Advanced Studies, who took over Albert Einstein's position, who helped me in thinking processes. I mean, I've just been blessed to meet amazing people along the way. And then I had a creative insight when I was working on a 2-volume set that I wrote on Mysteries of the Living Cell, the order of life and the creation and origin of life. I was writing a dissertation on that, which is about 1,000 pages. And I had an insight on redox reactions and how it related to order and organization in biological systems. And that led me to coming up with the work that I do today on accessing hidden order in apparent chaos for social systems and organizations and business and in human beings. So those are pivotal moments. But there's been epiphanies from reading and from so many books and so many interactions with people that I don't know, it's too numerous to count. There's just been hundreds of them over the journey.
Yeah, and the ones that you mentioned, the common thread, majority of them besides the private epiphanies that you had, have all been about being in relationships or being in conversation and communication with other people. And so I'm getting the impression that, do you think that it takes a certain amount of boldness for a lot of people to get in communication with someone that they may want to be mentored by or that they're fascinated by their information? What advice would you have for people starting out who really want to reach out and kind of be taught, be mentored, to go about that particular process?
Well, the first advice is to make sure that if you are going to mentor under somebody, that you really understand what they're committed to and know what their values are, to make sure that it's congruent. Because you don't want to subordinate to somebody just because they're high-achieving and then try to be somebody you're not. You need to be knowing yourself. That's why I wrote the book, The Values Factor, to make sure that people really looked and did an inventory of who they are, what's truly important to them, and not try to be somebody outside who they are. Because if you go and mentor under somebody that's not you and you try to be somebody that's not you, you backfire. So you need to know who that is, first of all, who that mentor is, and make sure that there's some degree of congruency. I've never had one mentor. I've had hundreds over the years that, and most of them have been in the literature, the classics. I mean, I started back with Thales and Anaximander and Anaximenes and Anaxagoras and Pythagoras and Heraclitus and, Lysippus and Democritus. And I went right down through all the great philosophers, read everything I could on every one of them, and all the way through to the Platonic, Aristotelian, and all the way down to Neoplatonics, all the way down to modern philosophers and modern thinkers, all the way to people who are on the cutting edge, and tried to identify anything I see in them that I thought was extraordinary. And then I would go inside and ask, where and when do I demonstrate that? I believe that there's nothing missing in any of us. And if we don't see it, we'll subordinate. But if we recognize it, we'll stand on the shoulders of giants and do something extraordinary and play in a bigger field. I'm a believer in putting my hand in a pot of glue and reading the greatest teachings, the greatest ideas by the greatest minds, and surrounding myself with a mentor of the greatest minds, but not as a subordinate, but as somebody who's a colleague that has creative ideas that we want to share. And I found that that's a productive and meaningful way of doing it.
Yes, putting somebody up on that pedestal, that unreachable pedestal, is ultimately not going to serve someone's growth and development.
Yeah, in my Breakthrough Experience program, which you know is one of the signature programs, I've been blessed to do that for now almost 26 years and about 1,030-something times. In that program, I teach people to make a list of the greatest individuals and leaders in every field that inspires you, and past or present, live or dead, and then go and read the biographies of these individuals and the writings of these individuals and lives of these individuals, and identify the 25 most admired and disliked traits, because you got to own both of them.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And identify them, and then do what I call the Demartini Method on them by owning the traits, and go and identify where and when you demonstrate them. And if you're enamored with the trait, what's the downside? If you're resentful to the trait, what's the upside? And level it out so you're not emotional about it. You're more objective and even-minded. And I have a set of steps that we go through. And the moment we finish that, and you realize that whatever you see in them, you have in you, the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same, you get to play in the same field that they played in. It's really quite inspiring. That's opened up doors in ways that's hard to describe in almost every field, down to filming movies, to working with governments, to leaders, to corporate leaders, to celebrities, to all kind of people that are out moving and shaking on the planet. So it really pays to honor the magnificence that we all have inside. I always say there's nothing menacing in us, and if we don't recognize it, neither will anybody else. But the moment we start to honor and value ourselves, the more the world does. So I really believe that everybody has a genius inside and a great original thinking inside and has extraordinary capacities inside. They just haven't honored themselves by recognizing it yet. So helping wake that up is essential.
Well, let's talk about waking that up then, because one of your quotes that I absolutely adore is to show people how to be resourceful in their perceptions and actions. Then no matter what happens in their lives, there's something they can do to achieve something extraordinary from it. So what are some ways that you recommend or that you show people how to be resourceful and unlock this potential?
Well, one of the great questions that I think, because the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions you ask, one of the great questions is, how did whatever I experienced today, whether it's supportive or challenging, positive, negative, nice or mean, kind or cruel, easy or difficult, how did it help me fulfill my mission? Knowing how to ask, no matter what happens, because it's never what happens to you. It is always your perceptions. And you have command of your perceptions, you have command of your actions. And if you ask specifically new questions on how specifically, whatever I'm experiencing, regardless of what it is, how does it help me fulfill my mission? How is it helping me live an inspired life? Then you'll always find a way to turn whatever's happened into opportunity. Because as you know, in the Eastern philosophies, the challenge represents opportunity. And so I think that that is a wise question every day. I learned from the gentleman who had 6 PhDs, who was 35. He said, never go to bed at night until you can see your entire day and scan it literally visually where there's nothing in there except thank you. And if you see anything other than thank you, you haven't seen the truth of that day. And so I have the largest collection of gratitudes of anybody probably on earth. Thousands of pages. Thousands and thousands of pages. And so I do that every day. I've been following that since I met him when I was 23. And even before I was doing it, because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. My mother taught me to do that. So I always say when you're grateful for what you got, you get more to be grateful for. So anything in your day you can't say thank you for, it's wise to ask, how is it on the way, not in the way, and how is it helping you fulfill your mission? And once you do, there's always an answer. And when you do, you're levitated, you might say, from any burdening, baggaged, emotional state. And you're lifted, and you're elevated to a transcendent awareness of what's going on, and you see new opportunities, and it's a way to go to bed at night where you're grateful, and you wake up inspired.
It just so deserves to bear repeating over and over again. How is something on the way, not in the way? And how is this helping me fulfill my mission? I hope all of you listening out there really write that down and take that to heart. Now, one of the things that I've noticed you touched on a little bit here is that you've worked with a number of different countries. It's about 60 different countries now? I mean, it's quite extensive.
We probably have another 5 coming online this year, so that's rewarding.
And that, of course, involves a lot of different cultural groups. So what recommendations would you give someone who wants to make sure they're reaching people from diverse cultures and backgrounds?
Well, that's interesting. I my original vision when I was 17 was standing from a balcony looking out over and speaking to 1 million people. And that vision's been painted and it sits in my office. And the city that I was speaking in, I made a composite of all the greatest cities in the world. So we took extracts from different cities around the world and put it into one painting. So this painting now is in my office when you walk in. So I had a vision of the earth, you might say. And then I put clocks in my office because I would see that in airports, sometimes clocks from around the world and some businesses that were international. So I put clocks in there and I started envisioning. And I put a map in my office of the world, and I started mapping, envisioning clients from all around the world, and then mapping and putting pins in the different countries. And if you go to my office in South Africa, you'll see an entire wall is the world, and we have magnets. We magnetize the wall, and we have a magnet of every country that we have students in. And we've pretty well got most of the countries now. And we're a map of where we have centers of growth occurring. So I'm a believer of doing that. Then I met Rupert Murdoch about 20-something years ago, and we had dinner, and I asked him, how did he build his empire? And he said, well, every day he holds this globe in his hand, and he spins it around, and he asks, what message do I want to bring to what part of the world today? And he said, it's important to have a celestial perspective, not a terrestrial perspective. Most people think from the earth outward, look out into the heavens. The wisest thing to do is look out from the heavens, looking at the earth, and think, okay, what do I want to do with this little planet today? And so I've always had an astronomical view, a celestial view, not a terrestrial view, for many years now. And I basically envisioned that, and I then made a list of every major city that had 3 million people or more on it. And I've got those, and I bold them in as we get new cities, where we get new students, and where I get to speak. And I have translators in each country that needs language changing. And I just kept working on it, and I've held that as a vision. And I see to myself that the universe is my playground, the world is my home, every country is a room in the house, every city is another platform to share my heart and soul. And as you know, I live on the ship called the world. That's the name of my ship. And it circumnavigates all over the world as I go off and on it. And so I've tried to make sure that I had an astronomical vision and a global perspective as far as I can go back.
As many people in the psychology world would say that, ego can become an issue, and many people, you were saying earlier that some of the ideas that you have might be considered, let's call it controversial, but, as we step further and further into leadership, one of the things, of course, we have to deal with are people's opinions about who we are and what we have to say. So as your message has grown and expanded out over the world, do you find that having this astronomical view helps you contend with individuals who might not resonate with your message?
Well, I learned a long time ago that if you want to make it to the top, you've got to embrace your hero and villain, your Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, your builder, maintainer, and destroyer. The body, the human body, has cells right from the beginning, from the zygote into its developmental biology. It has what they call apoptosis, which is pre-programmed cell death. It also has mitosis, which is pre-programmed cell birth. And as the body goes on, it eventually finds a nice balance between birth and death and build and destroy. And so nature has this intended in biological systems. And so I have to build and destroy. If I want to go out and bring original ideas that serve people, the only way I can come up with original ideas is be authentic and unique. Because if I'm trying to subordinate to everybody else, I'm not going to come up with original. I'm going to be traditional and conventional instead of original. So I have to be willing to be myself and authentic and integral with original ideas. And by doing so, anybody with traditional and conventional and mores background, I'm going to challenge their values. And so I have to be willing to embrace, support, and challenge labels of hero and villain. I have to be willing to have attacks, because my growth will only be to the degree that I can endure the challenge, not the support. Anybody can handle support. It's the challenge that determines the level you go. And so I kind of measure how well I'm doing by the amount of stirring up I do. If you're not on purpose, if you're not being crucified, you're probably not on purpose, as they say. So it's part of the game. So I get attacked in various countries sometimes and by various people sometimes, and that means that I'm stirring up stuff and I'm making some sort of contribution. But I have to realize that sometimes their feedback is useful feedback, and I have to listen, and sometimes it's just prejudice and jealous and bias and fear and who knows what. So I have to discern when it's quality feedback and I need to grow, and other times just need to stay steady and let them go through their reactions.
And that's part of that interplay between street smarts and academic smarts comes so into play along with all your years of experience.
I think it's a combination of that. And, my observation is that every human being both builds themselves up in pride and puts themselves down in shame, and they're building and destroying themselves. I've never found anybody on the outside build or destroy me more than me. So I never have to worry about the world on the outside. I remember the great philosopher from the Greeks said, the world around me is not what matters, it's the world within me. And I'd rather have the whole world against me than my own soul. I have to go by what's inspiring and what's true. If I discover something that's different than what other people think, but if my research points to it, I have to be able to be bold enough to stand with that research and go forward. Almost all great contributions came from people that endured challenge for at least 20 to 30 years sometimes up to 60 or more.
Wow. You know what? I think if listening back to this interview, we could probably pull an entire quote book out of this. So much to share. Thank you so much. Now, you had mentioned a couple of times about values, and the repeated theme of values shows up in your work quite often. So what makes values so important for people to be successful and fulfilled?
Well, from a single-cell organism, a paramecium, the paramecium will attract towards food and repel from toxins, and it seeks and avoids. And so our animal nature is avoiding things and seeking things. We have a value system. We evaluate and avoid and seek. And but the human being has something that transcends that. It has more than telenomics, where it learns from trial and error. It also has possible telelogics, which is purposeful and foresight. And our highest values, out of our hierarchy of values that each of us have that's unique, push us in the direction of what is foresight. Our lowest values in hindsight and telenomics. So it's important to prioritize your day and live by what's highest on your values and live that way, because your self-worth goes up, your space and time horizons expand, your achievement levels, your walk, your talk, your integral goes up, your willingness to embrace support and challenge go up. There's so many benefits by living congruently and in alignment with your highest values. I could go on for days on the significance of that. And so I emphasize that. Axiology is a very crucial study of values and worth, very crucial study for the human being. All drives, all decisions, all movements of the human being are derived from this. So you can't study human behavior without studying axiology, and that's one of my specialties. So I am very much a promoter of that. You won't see very many talks without me revolving around that.
So then if someone is taking this conceptually and then turning it into the practical, getting into identifying their values and then starting to make sure that they're congruent with those values, what are those first steps?
Well, your life demonstrates your values. Because every decision you make is based on what you believe will give you the greatest advantage over disadvantage, greatest reward over risk at any moment in time, based on your perceptions and therefore your actions. And that's based on the values. So your life demonstrates it. So you got to look at what your life demonstrates to determine what's really important to you. So I first look at how a person fills their space. Because things that are not important, they toss and get rid of. They want away from them. And things that are extremely important, they want close to them. They want to hold them and be around them. So I look at how they fill their space. Then I look at how they spend their time, because they always make time and find time for things truly important. And things they don't, they procrastinate time away. The third thing is what energizes them. When they're doing something that's really high in their values, they're energized, they're inspired, they can't wait to get up, they've got lots of energy. And when they're not, they're drained. So I look at what energizes them. I look at what they spend their money on, because if they don't value it, they don't buy it. So I look at how they spend their money in priority. I look at how and where they're most organized, because they tend to be most ordered and organized in their highest values. Then I look at where they're most disciplined, reliable, and focused, and where nobody has to remind them to do things. The thing that they're just spontaneously inspired to do without effort or without needing an outside incentive or motive. Then I look at what they think about how they want their life that shows evidence of coming true. Then I look at what they visualize about how they want their life that shows evidence of coming true. Then I look at what they internally dialogue as auto-suggestions about how they want their life that's showing evidence of coming true. Then I look at what they are conversing and externally dialoguing with other people about most that they keep wanting to bring the conversations to. Then I look at what is consistently the thing that inspires them and things common to the people who inspire them. And then I look at what it is that their most consistent, persistent goals that they focus on that they're achieving. And then I look at what it is that they can't wait to get up and read, study, learn, or listen to most, and where do they go to in the bookstores, and what do they read in the magazines and newspapers. And I look for common denominators in those 13 determinants, and I find when I look at the top common denominators, it's real clear what's highest on their values. And then we start structuring our life around that, and prioritizing things, and delegating everything else away. That's the key to a masterful and inspired life.
Perfect. So it's worth taking the time to actually sit down and consider every single one of these aspects, because if our life revolves around these values, and the discovering of those values really gives us the keys to our mission and our purpose and living a congruent life, then why skip over it in a little tiny period of time?
For whatever it's worth, on my website, drdemartini.com, there's a free booklet that goes through exactly those 13 determinants that a person can fill out in 25 minutes.
Perfect. Brilliant. We'll make sure that the link is up for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, because when they're done, they go, oh, my God, it's obvious. I can now see what I'm really doing. Because many people, majority of people in the world, in varying degrees or another, will subordinate to individual authority, collective authority outside them, and inject those values of others into their lives and attempt to be somebody they're not, which is self-defeating, which clouds the clarity of their mission and makes them have uncertainties and phobias because they've lost sight and don't have clear vision. And but we have a yearning inside our mind to try to break through those clouds and get to the sunny truth that sits in the heart that's trying to be inspiring to try to do something extraordinary on the earth. So what happens is this value determination process, if they follow it, it'll smack them in the face with obviousness. They'll go, oh, my God, there it is. And then they realize this is what they're really about instead of the fantasies that they may impose. And no fantasy you impose on yourself can ever make you as great as what you already are.
I'm just letting that sink in for a moment. No fantasy can make you... Oh, wow. Thank you for that. Now, because folks here are listening to the show are really focused on starting something in their lives, whether that is a business or other changes in their lives or creating a movement or something they have a vision to fulfill, something that comes up a lot that we get a lot of feedback on is dealing with concerns around energy and well-being and time. Now, this is clearly something that, having certain things delegated allows you to focus on your primary mission and your primary gifts. Now, and you travel a great deal. What habits would you recommend that people generate to care for their well-being so that their body can be the vehicle, part of the vehicle to fulfill their vision?
Well, in my particular case, when a person lives according to their highest values and is congruent, aligned, inspired, and prioritized, they don't live to eat. They eat to live. And eating to live means prioritizing and making sure the only thing that goes in your body is true food. Because it's absolutely ridiculous to put in your body something that's not food. So drinking adequate water, breathing deeply, eating quality, whole, natural foods as best can, vegetables and nuts and seeds and grains and fruits and vegetables and fish and fowl and basic things. I mean, real foods. If it's not a real food, it's not something, in my opinion, worth putting in the body. So I don't waste my time on anything but food. And then I make sure I drink a lot of water. I don't drink anything but water. Occasionally a vegetable juice, but I don't drink coffee or tea or anything like that. Anything that makes volatilities distracts us from presence. So I'm interested in water, which is a universal solvent, which mitigates those volatilities and brings homeostasis to pH, etc. And I'm a firm believer in eating, to live. not living to eat. Many people who are unfulfilled in their life because they're not living by highest values and they're subordinating to other things, they are looking for immediate gratification. They're compensating with consumerism, which sometimes shows up in food, and they're wanting sugar and things to make immediate gratification. And this causes a volatility and less performance of the human machine, you might say. So I'm a firm believer of that. I do believe that if you're grateful on a daily basis, you don't require as much sleep. I believe if you do, you perform more efficiently because you have less volatilities. Emotions, until you can manage your emotions, don't expect to master your life. So if you can't ask questions that mitigate emotional perceptions that are imbalanced, it's wise to go and learn that. That's why I teach the Demartini Method, because it helps people there. And, mastering that is important. And when it comes to flying, I fly, 500,000 miles a year probably. I'm up going towards 17 million miles of travel. And people say, you glow when you're on stage today. I say, well, that's because I got radiation coming in. And, joking. I usually, on a plane, I'll meditate. And I'll split the difference in time zones. So when I'm taking off in one city and landing in another, I'll split the difference and I'll meditate or rest on the plane if I need it. And I'll feed my mind with nothing but inspiring ideas. And I don't take breaks because I find that's an unproductive thing. What I do is I fill my day with highly inspiring things and keep a busy day. And I don't have jet lag or any of those things. That doesn't have any reality to me because it just doesn't make any sense. If you're inspired, you're present. When you're present, there's no time zones. So those are things that I found useful.
Great. Thank you. And so as we're kind of coming to the end here and I'm reflecting back on this conversation that we've had, it occurs for me that this is definitely a conversation that someone could listen to over and over and over again and pull tools and pull insight from many, many times. And I'm very grateful that you have been willing to share so much, and I know you have so much more. It's really quite endless. Now, as we're kind of leaving our listeners with a couple of steps that as they're starting out, as they're taking these steps to start something in their lives, to fulfill that vision, to be congruent, what are a couple of crucial, really important actions that they could go out and take to, make some powerful steps on this pathway?
Well, if they're entrepreneurs in heart, or for that matter, I think we all are in some respects, deeply. Mm-hmm. But don't presume. There's a principle and a theory called equity theory. And equity theory basically says that all people, unconsciously or consciously, are striving for fair exchange, innately. And anytime we exaggerate ourselves and minimize others and project our values onto them and are careless in our communication, we detour the growth of our industry. And anytime we minimize ourselves to somebody else and aggrandize them, we'll sacrifice on the negotiation table of profits. And anytime we have caring and equity between ourselves and others, and we have the seer equaling the seen, equity theory allows us to have sustainable fair exchange. And so it's very important to not exaggerate or minimize your customer, but to put them in your heart and make sure they're equals and make sure that you communicate what's truly valuable to you in terms of what's truly valuable to them. So they win, you win, so you both want to sustain continued growth. And so don't presume what people need, find out. Make sure you don't project assumptions, because that backfires. Care enough about humanity to find out what they need. I learned from the Book of Wealth that I was blessed to have one of the original copies of the 400 sets that were made. It's 10 volumes. And one of the things that I learned from this great tome was that the vast fortuned individuals through history of the last 2,700 years have been those that believe that they had, by divine providence or human sovereignty, a mission and vision and a feeling, a calling that they were here to serve vast numbers of people. They also had a desire to go and live the greatest standards that human beings could do to inspire others to go upward and not desperately downward. And they also transcended the labels of economics, so there was no good or bad associated with money. It was purely a measuring system of service that they were able to provide to people. So having equanimity within the mind and equity between ourselves and others is one of the key elements of empowering all areas of our life, not only the entrepreneurial spirit, but our own mission in whatever facet it is.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing with us all of your wisdom, or some of your wisdom. I know there's so much more today on the Start Something show. And Dr. Demartini, I'm very grateful for your work in this world and for you traveling and impacting so many people so that folks can be out there and fulfilling, their vision and mission and their greatness. And thank you for holding us up to be more than we are.
Well, the truth of our nature is we're magnificent beings. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to remind myself and others of that great principle.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Tina again. And just one quick note before we wrap up for today. That was pretty juicy stuff, wasn't it? It really, really was. And you can, of course, grab all the show notes at thestartsomethingshow.com for this show, as well as all of our other shows and any episodes you may have missed in the archives. You can also catch us not just on iTunes, but also on Google Play, on iHeartRadio, even on YouTube. So whatever your favorite way is to consume media, I invite you to go to that particular outlet, probably the one you're listening to right now, and like, rate, subscribe, make sure that we're staying connected. So tell us what you want. Tell us what you like. What's working for you. And you can do that at thestartsomethingshow.com. We love to hear from listeners. I love to have conversations with my listeners. And of course, you can connect with us on social media as well. All of those links are at thestartsomethingshow.com. Have a phenomenal week, and we will be back with you next time with more stories, more insights, more inspiration, more juicy goodness to help you live a fantastic life, have a phenomenal business, and leave a powerful legacy.